And we're live, Senators.
All right, thank you. This is Senate Health and Welfare. We are back. We have electricity, and we are joined by Senator Kitchel, who is here. Just to say that she and others have been doing a lot of work on looking at an amendment important to the child care bill. And Senator Kitchel, why don't you introduce yourself for the record and then take us through what you have very briefly. I know we'll have to spend more time than what you can give us today.
Thank you, Jane Kitchel, and I chair appropriations, and I have through conversations and trying to pick up on ideas. There's no question from the Senate perspective, doing something substantial to address our child care need is top of the list. When we go out, what was it? Workforce, housing, child care, broadband, always are the ones that come to the top. And so, I know you've been working on a child care bill. I also know that there has been a desire to do something around leave. And, as we know, certainly as we hear from people in the child care arena, they're very worried that somehow progress on the child care front somehow is going to fall victim to something that, may be very expensive, or the larger you make it, the more you increase the risk that it doesn't happen. And so, in conversations around how we could think about making some progress on both fronts, but really focusing on childcare, was to consider, and people were talking about this, if we're putting in more in terms of the cost of childcare for reimbursement, the subsidies to deal with salaries. They're particularly strong was a nexus between parental leave only. Parental leave to allow a parent, so that our most expensive childcare need, which is for infants, and also where capacity is the least, how we could provide a parental leave benefit, which up to 12 weeks, which would mean that those children are cared for by a parent and not coming into a child care center, or in fact, there might not be infant care available. And so it was trying to think about what is that nexus between, well, maybe it is a good goal to make it possible for parents to be able to stay home for a period of time after the birth. And so that led me to think about how we could put together something that is simple. And I had the pleasure, where is Damien here? No.
He's testifying in economic development,
So
we've asked him.
So one of my other assignments in the past was to work to put together a system, a benefit system for essential workers. And that was back when COVID and everything was shut down. And except for the people that were essential and were at risk, and they were the ones at the grocery line and, providing the essential services, and were allowed to work. And it was like, we were able to move $60 million out in benefits in a very simple way. We set an income level and moved it down. And the differentiation was part-time versus full-time. And it was designed really to recognize the work, particularly for, in this case, we set it at 25,000 income. So sort of taking that very simple concept, it seemed like we could perhaps create a nexus with childcare, because you pay a professional or you allow a parent to carry that forward. And I'm not claiming credit for any of this, because people have talked about it. I even had committee members, geez, wouldn't it be cheaper to pay the parent to provide the care?
Yeah.
And so in trying to distill it and create the nexus, what I have been working on with some other people, and this shows some earlier discussion here, and that is to create a parental leave benefit as part of our child care initiative. It wouldn't be CFAP, it would be a parallel program, but it would be very simple. it was set at, I've been modeling it at an income of 600% of federal poverty. Before the infant is born. So that's, if your household income is under that. And let me tell you, for a family that 4 persons, 2 adults and 2 children, at 600%, that's 180,000. So it would, but by doing that, it's sloped, because one of the things that we have a hard time with is, if you're under this by $1, you get it all. If you're over by $1, you don't get anything. And so it's similar to what's done with income sensitivity for property taxes. So how you create a slope so that people don't get really disadvantaged and fall off the cliff, which is something that's been of concern. And so what this would be modeling around, we were using a little less than $600 a week for a maximum of 12 weeks. But if you're looking at your lower income people, and for those of us who went through the parental leave, and this is a policy choice, but one of the things that we found was in like Rhode Island, the workers who had the lowest wages couldn't access the benefit, or they did not access the benefit because they couldn't live on a partial replacement of their wages, because their finances were so tight. They had to go back to work, but the benefit that they were helping pay for was being utilized by higher wage households that did have, could manage for a period of time on a partial wage replacement. So one of the things that this would do, if you keep it simple and you keep it a flat amount, and you get in the door at 600%, but what that replacement would be you don't want to replace it at an amount higher than wages, and because obviously wages, you're paying income taxes on Social Security, you're obviously having to incur work-related costs to get to work, etc. So the concept would be a weekly amount up to a maximum of total replacement, and that would benefit the families that have the least capacity to survive on a partial benefit. But then as you move up, then households with greater income and have had greater income would have more capacity. So the concept would be, and Damien can run through this, and we were sort of like borrowing on past experience, would be to add a complementary program to childcare, and it would be your family income, a certificate from your employer that you're employed and you're going back. Sometimes people might not, but nevertheless, the benefits time limits to begin with. And then it would be up to 12 weeks. And then it would be a flat benefit, not to exceed the amount of your wages that you earn. So the the lower income people, you don't want to do 110% replacement of wages. You want to make sure that it doesn't exceed what the earnings would have been without taking the leave. And then obviously the benefit would be the same right across. So you're in, this is what you get. And it could be done very simply. It wouldn't take an army of people. We know that because we did the essential benefit payment out, and they processed thousands of payments. So in looking at our estimates, and I'm not going to give them out now because they're really so preliminary, they're really in draft form, but if you did a replacement, and this would be for a new birth or adoption, because there are times when sometimes relatives have adopt family, or they might adopt a child, and in foster care that might be more than an infant or whatever. So if we looked at this at using those parameters, and at this point we were modeling at about $560 a month, which we looked at compared to the UI current maximum weekly payment is $531. So just sort of to look at some comparables, we think it would be in total about a $15 million benefit. But the goal here is simplicity. The goal is to recognize that there are times when, in fact, from a variety of policy reasons, having the option for a parent as opposed to a professional childcare giver, particularly where there's such a shortage of capacity. And the other part that does get into it, which is eventually we're working on getting the necessary data from childcare division to help us understand how many children are in under 4 that are in the childcare center, and sort of get that a better estimate of what that cost might be. But we certainly know that infant care is the most expensive, and right now, even with the limitations of the CPAP program, there is an adjustment because the staffing ratio obviously is higher when you're dealing with the very young infant and toddler population. So that, putting some dollar figures around what those policy changes would mean to increase the subsidy, look at how we expand the eligible number of Vermont working families that get the benefit, how that slope would look like in childcare. Hopefully we'll have a better understanding of what the fiscal realities look like. But this is in concept something that the chair asked me to kind of present to the committee as a nexus. I believe it's a good nexus to childcare. It certainly supports, I think, our goal and expanding capacity, and it addresses where, from a workforce perspective, it allows a parent to come back to work, and then what we do in the childcare program, I would say, you know, when you talk to employers, they're talking about the importance of childcare to support their workforce, to bring more parents into the workplace, and what that economic benefit is. So Damien, if he's here, can go through this. He wrote this draft up for me, and it was done because I was in an earlier meeting with leadership and the chair, and then I've been working with Damien subsequent to that. So if you've got any problem or complaint, you can direct it to me.
Well, no, there's no blame to be laid. I think that having this for us to look at is really very helpful. And what we'll do is we'll take the copy that you have,
Okay.
and then when Damien is available, we'll have him come in and go through it.
So maybe it's better to just wait until,
I
or
think-
unless people want to read it.
I think
and if-
people, our committee loves reading things.
Okay.
Is there anyone who doesn't want it? Do you not want to read it? I
would like it.
I'm happy to take it.
All right.
Can I ask a couple?
Yes, hold on a second first, and then we'll do that. And then because we also want to hear from Joyce and Nolan regarding some of the recommendations on the childcare piece itself, but having parental leave as a possibility here is particularly important, as you said, for infant care. We know it's more expensive. And we understand that there are some families who would like to spend some time with their kids, and they don't have access to family leave or parental leave in their workplace. So this is thank you for putting this together.
Well, as I say, it's kind of a distillation of different comments and observations that people have made, and also what seems to be realistic in terms of making progress, but not, but still reflecting what I think is the Senate top priority, and that is getting our child care program stabilized, getting reimbursement such that better salaries can be paid, and we can make some progress on that front. But none of this is can be done, obviously, without additional funding. There's no question about that. It's just how do we do it in the most measured way, and that's what I've been working on among other things. And
It's important
yeah.
to keep you busy.
Thank you, Jane.
Yes.
So there are questions, so what I'm gonna say,
see.
I think Senator Hardy has questions, but what I'm gonna suggest is if it's a deeper dive into the language, and if it's something you can hold for Damien, do that, otherwise, just, I welcome a question, so go ahead.
Sure. Well, one thing, I think the RAND, I was just scrolling through the RAND report because I think there's data in there about number of kids by cohort.
Yeah, there is.
That maybe would be helpful for costing it out. But I'm assuming you have looked at that, Joyce.
Yes, for the record, Joyce Manchester, Joyce Esquadas. The problem is that they use the 2015 to 2019 American Community Survey.
Oh,
They're
okay.
using a 5-year average of outdated numbers.
Got it.
So
Okay.
it's a little bit.
You're trying to get more updated information. That makes sense. And then I was wondering if either of you have costed it out for more weeks than 12. The main reason I asked was because anybody who's got a new baby, the longer that you can stay with the baby, probably the better. But also,
Well, for some of us, it was like getting our life back to go back to work.
yes, well, there's that for sure.
I'm not particularly maternal, apparently.
But the childcare centers, most of them don't take infants until 6 weeks old anyway. So this would just be a 6-week window that would be sort of helpful on the childcare fund. So extending that further would be more helpful to
Well,
alleviate
it all
the
adds up
childcare.
to, the more you extend it, the more you increase the cost.
Right.
And that's gonna ultimately, when you look at this, we were coming in around 15 million.
Right.
But if you want to do something, you say, well, we want to make the benefit higher, or we want to do it for a longer period of time, it's pretty easy to calculate that out. The question is, what is going to be reasonable in the revenues that have to be raised?
Right.
Yeah, so
Right.
that is a question, I think, the
Yeah.
question where it begins and how long does it go? And so we can have aspirations in here of having it extend longer, but it does,
But then you need to
Come
see a dollar.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
really what I think is going to be the next step. And that is,
finance and appropriations.
Yeah, and this is, of course, we're the equal offender opportunist when it comes to funding requests. If you sit in appropriations. Part of our
This
job.
is our big bill, this is
Well,
our big heavy bill.
And I throw this out, it seems like it's a nice nexus. It addresses a number of issues. I think it's reasonable. It won't take an army of workers to process the benefit if you keep it simple. And therefore administrative costs are very low. You don't have to build a whole IT system. Obviously, it was done with, what is it, Workforce maybe, software? I'm not sure what they use, but anyway, they moved out 60 million.
I know.
And DFR did part of that essential worker as well. So it was just sort of building on those past experiences that seem to work. And the more complicated you make it, the more staffing required, IT support, et cetera. Did have some discussion, and Joyce kind of modeled it. Well, what if we did a sliding scale? But then the more you do that, the more complexity in terms of, benefit calculations. So it is designed to be pretty simple. 600%, you're in the gate, and this is what you get. And you can't get more than what you're earning. And then there's some other policy decisions that would come with it.
Okay, right, well, so do you have another question?
Well, just a comment. I thank you for working out some of these details. This is something I had wanted to put in the original bill, and I lost that battle. So I'm glad to see it coming back in. I think the nexus with childcare is really important, and I think being able to make the choice to stay home or to send your child to childcare at the initial outset is really important for parents to make. So
Yeah.
I'm glad to see it come back.
It is good. I agree with you on that, all of what you said. And, so Senator Williams, you had a question.
No, just to what Senator Hardy said, I'm talking to daycares in my district and there's about a 6-week waiting.
Mhm.
So that'll help them to kind of line up healthcare or childcare for their
Yeah.
children when they, in the 6 weeks is up. I like it. It's good.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll go back to my morning.
What
committee.
we'll do is we'll read through. Where are you going? Are you making- You know, Senator Kitchell has been an honorary member of this committee
Oh,
during
gosh,
COVID.
I
so-
have. Oh, I
We
remember
could-
those first days
Oh,
of
my-
COVID.
Oh, I know, it was a lot of fun, but,
Yeah.
so, thank you for coming in, and this, we will go through this individually, and then we'll come back as a committee, we'll have Damien come in, and then Katie weigh in on how to connect and link, and Joyce and Nolan, there's some fine tuning built into this.
But at
request.
least it provides a framework, and I hope I've
Absolutely.
given you some sense of
Thank you.
how, sort of the, design principles and to get us to this point. And,
Thank you.
All right.
Okay,
See you later.
thank you.
All right,
So-
I'm glad the power came back on. I
So are
didn't
we.
drive in
I
and
mean,
then-
We're already feeling,
It's a bad week to lose
yeah, we're
power.
feeling nervous as it is.
I know, at least I'm recovered from COVID, so that's.
Yay, good to have you back.
Oh, I still left my mask on.
Oh,
Oh, you're recovered.
You're good for 6 weeks.
I don't know.
think so.
Is that what
90
it is?
days.
It is.
90
90 days, 3 months.
All right, well.
3 months.
3 months.
Thanks.
Bye. Jane.
All right, so,
90 days. the magic.
Katie is here, Nolan and Joyce are here. And during the little break that we had, I did meet with joint fiscal and Senator Kitchell, and others in trying to look, and Senator, Hardy was at the meeting yesterday regarding the parental leave, but we're also looking at what can we afford and what can we do, because the decisions that we make in here policy-wise are gonna affect what finance needs to do and what appropriations has to do. If they, and they may share with us, we can't go that high, then that'll be another discussion. So, but what we're trying to do is to get a ballpark of where we can be. And as we looked at that, we were looking at as you know, I started looking at the RAND report again, so, and that was fun, actually. And so all of the data that's in there is actually critical to decision-making for us. So Katie has gone together and put together some new language for our consideration. It's just a draft language on some areas of financing based on the RAND report and then what we heard from CDD and others. And right now I'm wondering how we want to do this, because I'm looking at Joyce and I'm looking at Nolan and I'm looking at Katie. Is the best way for you to come up and chat, or is the best way to begin with joint fiscal? Because we have such limited time.
Depends on what you want to know, where you want to start.
I want to start with Katie, but I don't want to eliminate what you have to bring to us, so. just do
Okay,
that.
I may need to be in another, I'm scheduled to be in another committee at 11:45. But I
That's a
don't know
good
if
reason
they're,
to start with you.
I don't know if they're also off schedule, there's a power outage.
Let's hope they're way off schedule. But they're upstairs, right? They can meet in the afternoon.
Okay, let me share this document. Katie Lynn, Office of Legislative Counsel.
So I'm just gonna run through some of the things that we talked about. Would that be okay? No, you can do that better than I can. Go
You'd
ahead.
like me to do that? Okay.
Yeah.
So, before we look at this language, I guess I should back up and just tell you what this is and what this isn't. So this sort of reflects a shift in the way, the thinking, is on how to calculate, the reimbursements to childcare providers. So the bill so far has included this concept of total cost of care and a pay scale and what should that look like. This version of the bill sort of flips that on its head, and instead of looking at the total cost of care and pay scales, this relies on the existing system of conducting the market rate survey every 3 years and basing rates to providers on that market survey. There are some adjustments to the current system. For example, right now, the reimbursement is at the 75th percentile for what providers charge across the state, and this increases that, so providers would be getting a higher payment, and we can look at that when we get to that language. But that is sort of the shift that's happening in this. This version of this amendment is incredibly messy because I'm striking through language that you've already looked at that would probably ultimately be removed from the bill, but in order for you to see what's coming out, I've retained it. So I'm thinking the next draft will be cleaner and easier to understand because those strike throughs won't be part of it, but for now, it is sort of complicated and difficult to understand. And then, as I've done before, the language that is completely brand new to the committee that you've never looked at before is highlighted in green. And then the yellow highlighting is new language, but you've seen it once before at least. So all of that said, there's a new legislative intent section. Legislative intent of the General Assembly is that investments in and policy changes to Vermont's childcare system shall increase access to and the quality of childcare services throughout the state, provide financial stability to childcare programs, stabilize Vermont's talented childcare workforce, address the workforce needs of the state's employers, provide policy recommendations for expanding access and capacity in Vermont's pre-K system, and reorganize DCF to ensure greater oversight and focus on childcare and early childhood education. And then we've renumbered our pre-K placeholder to reflect the fact that we have a new legislative intent section in. And then we have this language about the childcare subsidies. In previous versions, we've had this section repeated multiple times. And this section, in this version of the amendment, I only have this section appearing once, and I have all the changes taking effect on the same date, which is January 1, 2024. So we're removing language in subdivision A1 about the purpose of CCFAP being to obtain employment, retain employment, etc. In subdivision A2, this is where we have the family eligibility. So right now, for a family to have no contribution under the CCFAP program, they have to be at or under 150. This changes it to 185. That's a number this committee has discussed. And then to be eligible for the program in general, remember there's a sliding scale. The current number is the family has to be at 350% of FPL or below. And this version of the draft would increase that to 575% of FPL or below. Okay. Should we trade out?
No.
No.
Oh,
Okay.
no. Damian will be coming in probably tomorrow.
Perfect. Okay.
Thank you.
And then subsection 4, this is not a new to the committee change, this is cleanup. Subdivision 5 is an addition that you've seen before, that the department shall ensure that the applications for the CCFAP use simple plain language format. Applications shall be available in both electronic and paper formats. So that whole section takes effect again, January 1, 2024. And you'll see I've struck through section 3, which was the same section repeated, and that's when we had the tiered effective dates. So that will be gone in the next version that you see if you decide to go with this proposal, and you'll just have the words deleted instead. So that will, I just wanted you to see that change would be happening. Okay, so sections 4 and 5 amend the same section of law. this will continue to be tiered, so we'll continue to amend the same section of law twice. The first change in section 4 moves to enrollment-based versus attendance-based. That would take effect July 1 of 23. Then we're amending the same section again. And this is, the idea is that this is sort of paired with the eligibility language we just looked at. So it had the same effective date of January 1, 2024. So this is all the language about the market rate. So in subdivision C1, the payment schedule established by the commissioner may reimburse providers in accordance with the results of the most recent Vermont Child Care Market Rate Survey. That's existing law, and the proposal is to keep that. This is the survey that's conducted every 3 years. And subdivision 2, we have new language. The payment schedule shall include reimbursement rate caps tiered in relation to ratings and the Vermont STARS program. And then we have more specificity. So providers who are earning 4 and 5 stars, they're receiving a payment at the 100th percentile. Uh-oh, my battery's running low. They're receiving a payment at the 100th percentile of all reported rates on the survey, meaning that they are receiving the rate of what top providers are providing in the state. The highest tuition fees where the 4 and 5 star providers are being reimbursed. And providers who are earning 3 stars or less are receiving a reimbursement rate at either 85th percentile of all reported rates or at 95th percentile of all reported rates, depending on whether they are a family registered, or I should say regulated, family childcare home or a center-based program. And that reflects current practice, that one is 80th
I'm seeing
percentile,
Joyce
95th.
behind you. Is this a time for a comment?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Katie, we talked about this very briefly yesterday. In fact, we're taking the 3-star reimbursement rate at the 75th percentile and bumping that up by this, so that it would be at the 100th percentile. So it turns out that it is 85% of the 5-star amount,
Okay,
not at the
5th percentile. That, you know, I had an earlier draft that had that and I switched it out. Okay, so that's good to know. I will change that. So it will be the, and it's 85 for centers and 95 for homes. Okay.
Wait, can you just explain that differentiation again? The
85% 5-star.
Right, so.
if the
so
5 stars
current-
getting 100%, then
So currently, the 75th percentile amount, in other words, 75% of providers are below that, 25% are above that, that's the reimbursement amount.
okay,
And we're just saying, let's expand that up to the 100th percentile. So we're
Right.
taking that amount, dividing it by 0.75, and that's the new reimbursement amount
for 3-star programs,
for both, actually.
for 3, 4, and 5-star programs?
4 and 5-star programs, we'll take the current 5-star reimbursement amount, divide that by 0.75, and that's the way to expand it up to 100%.
Oh, I see, okay,
Right?
yeah,
And then
okay.
take the 3-star amount, divide that by 0.75, and that expands up to 100% of the time.
Okay,
Yeah, and that's what we had talked about, but it's nice to hear it again.
why wouldn't we just, I'm sorry, Katie, I'm just trying to work out the math in my head. Why wouldn't we just say the reimbursement rate is 100th percentile instead of doing the math dividing?
How do you get there? We don't have the survey results. What we see is the 75th percentile amount. So in order to get to the 100th percentile, the current amount equals 75% of the max, right? So we're going with.
Don't we have the survey results?
I don't.
Oh. Do we never?
We have a table that shows this is what the 75th percentile amount is.
When we get the survey the next time, will we have the 100th?
I'll find out.
Okay.
That's what we need.
Okay,
So
it
it
just
could-
seems like
so this could-
gymnastics
this-
to get to what we should have.
Yeah, so the language could change depending on what we're working with, but yeah, So it would be, maybe we should just put something in there about the survey, rather than fussing around with something less than what
Of course,
Yeah.
the next time the survey is taken.
comes out.
Right,
Yeah.
but the amounts will be totally different. because
Exactly.
They will then reimburse different amounts, so something's gonna have to change.
So
next
I'm
time the
looking
survey
at
comes out.
our expert writer here to help.
Well, I will rewrite it, in accordance with Joyce's instructions for the time being. And if
Sure.
it turns out that there's a conversation with DCF and JFO that makes it more, a streamlined way of calculating that, then we can update the language to reflect that.
Okay.
But right now, the concept is, there's one rate for 4 and 5 stars, a different rate, for 3 stars or below, and that, second rate is bifurcated depending whether there's a center-based program or a home-based program.
And then that really comes from the data on page 415 of the RAND report that helps us understand the different centers that are rated 4 and 5 versus 1, 2, and 3. So,
So there's a sentence in existing law that the lower limit of the reimbursement rate cap shall not be less than the 50th percentile. So this new system is envisioning well above that. So
Yeah.
that sentence would be removed from existing law. And then there's language at the top of page 7, which is, we've been calling an escalator. So on years in which the new Vermont Child Care Market Rate Survey is not available, so there, we said it was every 3 years. So 2 out of every 3 years, we don't have new data. The rate used to reimburse providers shall be increased in alignment with the most recent increase in the employment cost index.
Who runs the employment cost index?
That-
Whose product is that?
who does that?
The Labor Department.
Dio.
Thank you.
Okay, so next we had, the last time you looked at this, we had language, a new section 5A. This was a report on asking DOL to come up with a pay scale and asking DCF to define the total cost of care. And this section would be removed under this proposal because you're moving towards market rate data instead of the total cost of care and payroll, or excuse me, pay scale. Next, section 5B, this is not new since the last time you've seen it, but this was incentivizing high quality care. This is a report back from DCF on proposals to incentivize high quality care. And then we haven't put changes with regard to the wait list and application fee language. No changes on the non-citizen language. No, that's non-citizen language. No changes on the special accommodation grant since you've last looked at this. No changes to the workforce retention grants. No changes to the scholarship language. We do have changes that you haven't seen yet with the transition language. So now this section would read the building break.
Before we go there, I'm
Mhm.
wondering, look, I don't, this is very important to us, obviously. But how I was thinking before we go there, we might want to go back to Joyce and look at the 575 piece and the slope and what we have there and what she's figured out with that. And then come back to this one on transition.
Sure,
Yeah, let's do that.
I may have to, yeah, before you
No.
get back to me, but
Absolutely. not.
okay. We'll see.
Thank you. Alex, could I please, I need to.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'll
Zoom.
take that down.
No, I need to be in Zoom. I see Eric Fitzpatrick is here. Eric, we're a little bit behind. I'm not sure we're actually gonna get to you today. But if you just stay online and if you're able to do other work while we're here, that would be great. Okay.
What's going on?
Maureen's a little bit depressed. There's no way I'm gonna have it.
Thank you,
Jenny.
Oh, they're in there. What's trail mix?
Trail mix.
M&M's, raisins and nuts.
I know.
Can I ask a question while we're?
Go ahead.
What was the reason, or maybe I should know this, what's the reason for moving to market rate and total cost of care?
That's a very good question for Joyce as we go through this.
Yes, so, let's see, I've updated,
For the record,
Yes, it's my
Oh.
copy. Gotta mute.
I,
Just gotta mute yours.
This makes it look like she's muted.
You have to stop and share.
well, I came in unmuted. I don't think
I muted you, Joyce.
Oh.
Okay, good.
okay,
So, yeah, good.
you're there. you're there.
Okay, so let's see. My job was to show you.
For the
what-
record,
For the record, Joyce Manchester joins us. My job is to show you what it looks like to use this new reimbursement method for CCFAP and to start the family reimbursement at 185% of the poverty level. It turns out that in order to avoid a big spike at the end, we have to keep it going, keep CCFAP going at $25 per week per 25% increment in the poverty level, all the way up to 575%. Okay, so,
question,
Actually, it's not a question, it's more a comment. I think we all fully understand the cost of childcare. And this spike might just be an anomaly, a part of the fact that it is an expensive service. Going up into the 500s federal poverty index, makes it a really hard sell. And it costs more. And I'm just wondering, I'll just leave that as a comment.
Okay.
We need to reflect on the total cost of this program.
let me just say, while you're doing that, that we are looking at that total cost, and that will be something that both finance and appropriations will look at. We had, that was part of our global discussion as we asked Joyce to cost this out for us. I think that if, I don't know where you land, what is a pleasant surprise? For me, it was a pleasant surprise to see where we can land utilizing dollars that are currently available to us. So that is an important question, but let's go through this, understand what's here. And then as we go forward, we'll look at what the total cost might be.
okay, so I'm going to zip through slides that you've seen before.
Yeah.
And this
Go ahead.
was just setting up how CCFAP works, so I hope everyone remembers that.
Yeah.
So you'll remember that right now, the CCFAP reimbursement for a 5-star center-based care is $17,250, and that's an average cost. I've taken infant, toddler, preschool amounts to get an average. So that's the $17,250 as a rough estimate of what we currently pay. This is the chart that shows you per week how the payments differ by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stars. On the left for licensed care in centers, and on the right for registered homes. And what you may notice is that the 3-star rate for centers is $300 full-time infant. For 5 stars, it's $349. So there is a bit of a difference there. The 3-star rate is 85% of the 5-star rate. I'm sorry, the average would be if you were across infant, toddler, preschool. For registered homes, the difference is much closer. So for example, the infant is 207, 3 stars, 225 for 5 stars. So you can see that differential is much more narrow. Okay, you will remember this chart. This is the existing system. It starts at 150% of family poverty down on the x-axis, the horizontal axis. It goes up to 350%, and then we see that spike. So families at 350% are all of a sudden paying a higher cost. This is what it would take to smooth out that line so that there is no spike, and you can see that we're going up to 475%.
That's when you start at 150.
That's right, and that's the current system with, $17,000. Let's see, why,
And the $17,000 is based on prior year's experience.
That's the current year
Right.
reimbursement. It's an average of infant, toddler, and preschool
Yeah.
reimbursement rates. For some reason, I am not able to advance my screen. What is the problem with that? Oh, there we go. Okay, so these are the tables that you've seen before. I'm not stopping here. I'm going to keep going.
Yeah, keep going.
Okay, so remember we had this big increase in costs if we were to go to the RAND report suggested high quality cost of care. The average went up to $28,100, and we had this very large spike at 350%. In order to smooth out that spike somewhat, we went up to 500%. That shrinks the spike, but it's still there.
Still there.
Okay, so that's all based on the RAND report. Now, there we go. Okay, now I'm going to show you how we got to these what we are calling the middle ground reimbursement rates. So here we have at the 75th percentile from the survey, currently, the average reimbursement to providers is about $17,250 per year. That's $332 per week. If you move down to the next level, we're talking about some intermediate level, okay? And final, and this is all based on the high quality average reimbursement, which is that $28,100, okay? So we said, let's try to be somewhere in the middle, at least for now. And so we were tossing around some numbers, and it turns out that if we use the 100th percentile reimbursement instead of the 75th, we get pretty darn close to the middle ground. Okay, so it turns out 23,000 is at the 100th percentile using this rough average. That would be $442 a week. And that means that we're moving from 61% of what RAND says is high quality reimbursement up to 82%. So indeed, we're going about halfway up to where high quality reimbursement would be. Okay, so that's how we got to that number. So 23,000 is the average that CCFAP would reimburse providers per child, 0 to 4. Okay, so here's the picture that comes from using that $23,000 per year. And you can see that I'm now starting at 185% of the federal poverty level, but I'm joining the CCFAP family amount on the same schedule, okay? So the family that's just above 185% of poverty would be paying $50 per week. So there is no family paying $25 a week, right? That was 150 to 175. We've passed over that and we've gone to 185 paying $50 per week. We've rejoined the schedule and we keep it going until we don't have a spike, just for illustration purposes. But for $23,000, you'd have to keep going to 575% of poverty. Okay, any questions about that? You can see that I've now figured out how to put the family of 3 and the family of 4 incomes on the chart. So this is a new innovation for me.
I didn't notice that.
Very useful. Yes. Thanks to Stephanie, yes. But you can see that 600% of the federal poverty level would be at 149,000 for family of 3, 180,000 for family of 4. And at that level, they would be paying about, well, a little less than 16%, right? So that's 600% of the current federal poverty guideline.
Go ahead. So family at 600%
Would be paying full price.
would be paying,
Well, would be
well,
paying,
or
yeah.
what it's, there's a scale for the income, there's a scale for the reimbursement. Is there a scale for the
Family contribution.
payments?
Yeah.
Is it the 23,000 each time? It's a percentage of the 23,000 as you move up the scale.
Yes, and we are assuming that the child care center is charging the 23,000 on average for those 0 to 4 kids. Now, in fact, some centers charge more than that and expect the families to pay on top of whatever the CCFAP reimbursement is.
Okay, so if a family is on the scale where they're paying 10%, the family would be paying 2,300. And the state would be, CCFAP would be paying the rest.
Nope, because the family at 300, or are you saying it? I'm sorry, did you say at 10%?
Yeah, I
They're
was
paying
just trying to
10%?
use some easy math.
Yeah, so they are paying 10% of their income,
Oh,
which
it's,
is much less
course,
than
yeah,
the
sorry.
23,000, because they're getting a good subsidy from CCFAP, right?
okay.
And it looks like
I'm just trying to figure out along the scale, how much is the payment to the childcare provider from the state?
Yep, and we know that it starts at $50. Well, so you're asking, okay, this chart will not tell you that.
Yeah, okay,
Right, but
that's good.
there could
I
be
mean,
a companion
I'm
chart.
misunderstanding. It could be another chart.
It
There's
could be
always
another
room for
chart.
another chart.
There'd be a
There's
table.
always-
I think there'd be a table. What is it?
Or there could be a table, yes, yes, and
$25 a week up to 35.
I'm just trying to see how much does in dollars, how much does the family pay?
right,
How much does the state pay? And how much does the childcare provider get?
50, 75.
Can we sort that one out?
I believe that it would be about, 150 a week, I believe is what the family pays. Well, okay, 125 per week, maybe,
At the 10, at the
10%.
10%.
And you'll see that my dash line is not in the right spot because I moved my chart around. It's
Okay,
okay, so we're good?
yeah, we've got like a minute, maybe
thank you.
two.
Well,
Oh, my gosh.
so
Oh,
that's the end for
wow.
now. But,
Yes,
what I should do is work out this,
Senator Weeks is up next with a question.
So just a fundamental question. So right now you're using 23,000 per year as the average cost. The RAND
Average.
report,
reimbursement, yes,
right, so,
which is based on that survey, yes.
right, okay, so the RAND report had the estimated cost of high quality childcare at about 28,000 per year.
Correct.
What have we changed to get that delta of 5,000 per year lower? I don't see any difference in the language between high quality that's in the RAND report and high quality that's in the bill.
Sure.
So what's changed that caused us to use a lower estimate?
So this may be a policy question more than a
Katie
numbers
question,
question.
that's a policy question. Yeah, go ahead, Katie, can you?
I don't have an answer to
Yeah.
that question. There's no language change to account for that.
Okay, and second part of the question, the 28,000 was based on old numbers prior to the last,
Mm-mm.
No,
no, these are new numbers.
17 is based on old.
Well, so the RAND folks tried very hard to look at the most recent data and then to move it up to 2022, then 2022 dollars, yeah. So the 28,000 should be relatively recent. I will say that you're thinking about moving from 28,000 down to 23,000.
No, I'm looking for the justification for, if we're calling this high
Yes.
quality, what changed from one
Yes.
concept of high quality to another concept?
In my mind, we're moving from 17,000, whatever it is, 250 up to 23,000 in an effort to move toward high quality. So we won't be able to do all the things in the RAND report, but we're moving in that
So I'm
direction.
looking for what's the difference? What
Yes,
are we
and
doing in high
I
quality?
believe that the senators had in mind that if you increase the reimbursement, the directors of the childcare the childcare centers would have the flexibility to do what is best for their center. And if that means give all the increase to salaries so that you can recruit better people, or if that means, do something to your physical plant in order to get towards high quality.
Okay, so are we gonna see that language change at some point?
The language that's in the bill, you're talking about the 4 and 5 star cohort versus the 1, 2, and 3 cohort. And then there's also in the bill what I call the baby bump, so that you get something in addition for having 0 to 2, the younger the babies. So that's another discussion. So the point of this is to look at how can we improve the support for childcare centers at the same time we're supporting workforce and families. And what can we do to move toward, so I call the platinum grade that's in the RAND report, 28,000. How can we move in that direction so that childcare centers survive and workers can work and have some professional recognition of that work? So, and the bottom line of all of this is our economy requires childcare centers. Our businesses require these childcare centers. Without childcare centers, workers can't work. So ultimately, it all ties together. So the goal is to improve those funds and support available for childcare centers to do all of the things that we've been talking about. This is an opportunity for us to say $17,000 going forward isn't going to be sufficient. Absolutely not. The $28,000 is probably too much for us to bear financially. When we think about the total cost that the RAND report was looking at, is huge. This is some middle ground that now we're evaluating for how much is it going to cost? What do we need to raise in terms of revenue? What revenue do we have available to offset new revenue? So those are the questions that we'll begin to look at as we do this. But ultimately, it's moving, as I think, as Joyce said very well, we're moving in the direction of improving our childcare centers overall. So cool. This will be an ongoing conversation. We'll come back to this tomorrow morning. See when it's on the agenda, folks. At 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, and this will be, we'll be looking at the language again. I'll see whether Damien can be available to us in that first hour and how it goes. And we are going to call this a wrap. So we'll go off live, Alex and Eric, with apologies for you being patient. We'll come back to